So this one today I'm going to give is the first of the series. I call the series Bacon and the Mysteries. So this is going to be the first of the series on the Dionysian Mysteries. And try and give something of the ageless wisdom teachings which underlie the great Rosicrucian work of the English Renaissance, and which form a foundation for what's happening now and into the future, really. The wisdom never ceases, but our knowledge of it increases as we go on. At least we hope it increases. So I'm going to start off just saying a little bit about the mysteries generally, and then I'll go into the Dionysian Mysteries, which are probably the oldest mysteries we know on this planet, even older, it's thought, than the ancient Egyptian mysteries. But they certainly go hand in hand with each other, at any rate. The mysteries themselves are sacred, allegorical, and mythological dramas that are acted out on the stage of the world. As Shakespeare says, we're actors on the stage of the world. And the mysteries are allegorical, mythological dramas that contain great wisdom within them. So they're designed to help us actually not just learn about, but experience in practice the actual wisdom itself. So they're based on ancient wisdom and designed to reveal that wisdom by means of the dramas and hopefully the mystical experience gained by enacting them. So the word mystic actually comes from the word mystes, the Greek word mystes, and that's where mystery also comes from. The mystic and the mystery are, the one is the participant in the mystery and the other is the drama that the mystic takes part in. That's where the words come from. I mean, nowadays it's greatly misunderstood and misused very often. But that's the original meaning of them. Now, such, the wisdom, as you all know, the wisdom is both divinely inspired and also revealed in nature, but as well as to be found in these stories. So the stories are a help for us to see what's in nature and also to get that divine inspiration at the same time. So the two things work together. And the stories themselves, or myths, describe the process of life, of evolution and initiation, of transformation and transmutation, of mortal birth, growth and death, followed by, hopefully, resurrection and ascension as an immortal. That depends on how well we act our mortal life out. Now, symbolism is used to enhance the normal language and to enable the psyche to understand the deeper truths, because that's how our mind dreams, of course, in symbols. And some symbols are very, very good. Now, each mystery tradition throughout the world is associated with a particular landscape of the world, which helps mold the allegory and reveal the wisdom in relation to that landscape's role in the greater whole, whilst at the same time revealing the truth of all. So you can't separate the story from the land, just as we're connected with the land. We're in a sense we're part of nature, and we're also part of that land, which is part of nature, wherever we might be. So the mysteries are honest, and they developed as a result of that. There are two basic levels of the mysteries: those for the general public and those for the initiates. And they are two quite different things, really. For the public, that's generally presented as entertainment. They can take it as they like it, rather like the Shakespeare plays, which are performed and still being performed at the moment. In our age, I mean, they stopped performing them on stage because of the coronavirus at the moment, but they'll soon be back on stage. But the real mysteries for the initiates are acted out in special places, specially selected as part of the environment, or a huge part of the environment. There are different scales to this. And the purpose of these is to lead the initiate or initiates step by step, degree by degree, past veil after veil, and into an ever-increasing practical and illumined knowledge of truth. When acted out not just to develop the individual, but as an act of service for the greater good of society and the world, the mysteries become a powerful vehicle for the light of wisdom to operate and manifest in the world. It's worth thinking about that. So it's not just for entertainment or just, to learn something personally, but if you do it as a work of service, actually doing something good for the greater whole at the same time, then a much greater illumination comes about. The mysteries enlighten the mystics, enabling them to become seers, and they help to balance, harmonize, heal, and raise the consciousness of others all around, and even the world itself. And this is where the importance of these mysteries lies, because if people as initiates, if we as initiates actually act them out as works of service in true mystery stories in the right landscapes of the world, then it really will help to heal, balance, and raise the consciousness of the whole world itself. And that hopefully is being done by many people at this time as we go into the new great age. I would even go so far as to say us safely getting into the new great age depends very much on the performance of these mysteries. Whatever they might be and wherever they might be, different groups and so on perform them in different ways. Well, the Dionysian Mysteries are amongst the oldest of the mystery traditions. And they were established first in ancient Thracia and renovated by Orpheus. Hence, they're known sometimes as the Orphic Mysteries. And its wisdom underlies that of Christ and the Christian mysteries, something not many people realize, but they do. And hopefully my talk will help enlighten you a bit towards that. But I will be doing a separate one on the Christian mysteries later on in the series. Now, the Hebraic Mysteries, as founded by Abraham, also had a basis in the Dionysian Mysteries, the form of which was being practiced in Haran in Mesopotamia, from where Abraham originated. So that's something to bear in mind. Underneath, or in the background, if you like, the Hebraic Mysteries was actually the Dionysian Mysteries. But over time, people lost the original teachings. That's what Jesus came to restore to them, really, as far as I understand it. Now, the Dionysian Mysteries are key to understanding, in particular, the mystery of Europe as a whole, and also that of Francis Bacon and the Rosicrucians. Both these are very important to me. I get excited by both of these because it opens doors to huge things, really, once we get to understand it. So a myth is really a story of initiation. And Orpheus was the great known exemplar of this. And so that's why he was sometimes referred to as Dionysus himself. Well, he showed initiation right up to the very highest and demonstrated how to do it and what can happen, just as Jesus did later, and maybe in a more powerful way than Orpheus himself. But Orpheus is the one connected mostly with the Dionysian Mysteries. And in these mysteries, it's about 3 or 4 main characters, really. There's a character called Persephone, but she falls in love with Zeus, the great god Zeus. So Zeus and Persephone are the key characters to start with. And through their love, they produce a child called Zagreus. Zagreus goes through various tests and he gets raised up or ascended as Dionysus. Dionysus meaning son of God. So those are the main characters in this story. There are other characters too, of course, but these are the main characters, and they actually describe a process that takes place in each of us if we're on the path of initiation. And then, because these mysteries use allegories and symbols, because ordinary language isn't sufficient really, you'd have to write, one symbol can express a whole library of books, basically. A symbol can be wonderful if you get the right symbol. Well, in the Orphic version of the Dionysian myth, the god Zeus appears to the goddess Persephone in the symbolic form of a bull. Take that in for a moment. Persephone is not described as such, but the similarity with the Egyptian mysteries infers that her symbolic form is a cow, a bull and a cow, like Osiris and Isis in the Egyptian mysteries. The child she gives birth to, known as Zagreus, has the symbolic form of a young bull, or bull calf, as we call it. And then Zagreus, the bull calf, is raised up to become Dionysus, the swan. So the bull becomes the swan, a creature that walks the land and can't fly, but is used to plow it and so on like that, is transformed or transmuted into a bird that can fly in the sky. And the swan is like the goose. It was taken as a symbol of a bird that flies the highest of all and can go over great mountain ranges and so on like that. And also the story of the sweet singing song to sweet singing swan. And of course, that's a symbol of a great poet. Now, Zeus in Latin is Deus or Zeus. Zeus, Greek Zeus, is Latin Zeus or Deus, which translates as God. And we still use that today in the Christian church, but many people in the Christian church don't realize it comes from the name of Zeus, Greek god Zeus. At least it's one of its derivations. Now, Zeus in particular signifies love in its all-embracing, compassionate and wise form. It is the primary creative aspect of Eros, the divine love, wisdom, intelligence, and light of the universe, who is known as the firstborn, the first manifestation of the unmanifest. You see, it's, for me, at any rate, it seems very clear, these teachings, whereas you can go into teachings of other mystery schools of religions and it's quite confusing, but this is absolutely clear. God or Zeus or Eros was called what's called the firstborn, the light of God, was called Eros by the Dionysians and Orphics. And it represents divine love. God is love. And God is wisdom, intelligence, and light of the whole universe. The first manifestation of the unmanifest. So it's darkness made visible, if you like, and the light is the dark. The light is the darkness made visible. Just as darkness is invisible light. Now, why choose the bull? Well, there are different reasons for that, but the bull cow symbolism refers to the zodiac sign of Taurus. And Taurus happens to be the alpha sign of the zodiac. It's not Aries, it's Taurus. Taurus is the alpha sign of the zodiac and of the alphabet, because the alpha or letter A, or Aleph in the Hebrew alphabet, starts off the alphabet. And it's said that it contains the whole alphabet within it. And it signifies the creative word of God that begins every cycle of time and process of life. And our letter A is derived actually from the hieroglyph of the head of a bull. And that's how we get the form of our letter A. And it was used in the mysteries as an emblem of truth, meaning the word or wisdom, and became a signature of the key mystery schools of the Renaissance. And in ourselves, Taurus rules the throat, by means of which the word is sounded, either internally as the inner voice, which speaks intuitively to the mind, or outwardly as speech to others. I'm going to share my screen now to show some pictures that might help you. on this. So here you've got the human body shown with the different signs of the zodiac that are said to govern different parts of the human body. And you can see there Taurus actually rules the throat and the neck and the ears, the whole hearing and speaking functions of the human body. So it's associated with sounding the word of God. And this voice, the voice that we're talking about, creates an idea of thought form in the mind. And that's the inner voice, which then leads to an action, or you can speak outwardly the truth, one or the other. Now the myth, another myth, the myth of Europa and the bull, is the one that gives its name to Europe. And this myth is a simplified form of the Dionysian Mysteries. And the child of Europa and the bull, which is Zeus, is Hermes Trismegistus, known to the Romans as Mercurius or Mercury, the immortal mortal. And this is an epithet of Zagreus and Dionysus, or Zagreus Dionysus. Showing you a map of Europe now. And if you look very carefully with imagination, you can kind of see that the outline of Europe looks rather like a bull coming out of the Black Sea, as the myth says. You know, the myth is about the bull emerges from the Black Sea and flies across the seas to a special place where it makes love to Europa, and then they have a child. That's the good version of the myth. And so you can see the head of the bull down here, where Portugal and Spain is now. And then the back of the bull arching over, and it's emerging out of the Black Sea. And the heart of it, we found, is marked by Constance and the land all around it. And Europa herself, the goddess, if you like, is sitting on the neck and shoulders of the bull, and that's represented by the British Isles here. So I'll give you a little while just to take that in, and I'll just say it again to help you. The form of the bull can be seen imaginatively in the landscape of mainland Europe, wherein the lowered head of the bull is represented by the Iberian Peninsula, with the Atlantic coastline of Portugal being the face of the bull. It's still known as the face today, face of Europe, face of the bull. And Madrid used to be Toledo, Madrid nowadays marking the bull's eye. And then you've got the great pilgrimage center of Santiago de Compostela marking the crown chakra of the bull. And the main chakra system of this European bull follows the great pilgrimage route from what's now Istanbul, used to be Constantinople, from Istanbul or Constantinople in the east, right across mainland Europe to Santiago de Compostela in the west, passing en route through Constance, the heart, and then through Bourges, the throat. And that is still a major pilgrimage route today. Thousands and thousands of pilgrims walk that every year. It's becoming even more popular, believe it or not. And it's quite an experience in itself. The British Isles were known anciently as the sacred or blessed Isles of the West. And they're composed now primarily of the three lands of Scotland, Ireland, and Britain. Britain being the Roman Britain, England, and Wales. And this signifies the triple aspects of the goddess, or the triple goddess, if you like. It's a wonderful way, three lands expressing the three aspects of the goddess. So she's Europa in this European bull myth, or in the Dionysian myth, she's Persephone. And at another level, she actually becomes Athena herself, who's the same as Britannia. Britannia, shaking her spear, is the same as Pallas Athena, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. But in her incarnation, she's called Persephone, whereas Zeus in his incarnation is symbolized as the bull. In Catholic tradition, there's a kind of support to all this. In Catholic tradition, the British Isles are known as the dowry of the Virgin Mary. For a goddess or queen is represented by and considered synonymous with the land. That's why a king is meant to be the guardian and carer of his queen, because the queen represents the land and the queen are the Holy Grail, and the king is meant to be the guardian of the Holy Grail. Not that it's been done very well over the years, over the centuries, but that's the whole thinking ideology behind it, if you like. But we don't have to be kings and queens to act that out. We can just be partners, looking after each other and caring for each other. Now, in the sky, Taurus is a constellation, and sitting on its neck is the Pleiades. The Pleiades is representing Europa in the sky. See if you can see it on this picture. Here's Taurus that I'm pointing to now, and there's the star cluster known as the Pleiades. They have a very special function, even physically as well as spiritually and mythologically. So the star cluster of the Pleiades means the seven sisters, but they were considered to be collectively one, as it were, and as one they were called Maya, which means the mother. And of course, in terms of myth we're talking about, she's the mother Europa, or mother Persephone, the mother of the golden child, called Hermes Trismegistus, or Mercury, or Zagreus, who becomes Dionysus. The Dionysian Mysteries were born and developed in ancient Thracia, but then spread to the rest of Europe. Ancient Thracia once surrounded the whole Aegean Sea. The Greeks came along much, much later. They're quite a recent settlement, if you like. But before that, it was ancient Thracia all the way around. So it included what's called the Near East here, this part of what's now Turkey, bordering on the Aegean, included what's now Bulgaria, and also what's now Greece, and presumably all the islands all the way around as well. So that whole area around the Aegean was ancient Thracia. Now, Orpheus, who is thought to have lived at the time of the pharaoh Akhenaten of ancient Egypt, was the renowned instaurator and exemplar of the Dionysian Mysteries, demonstrating to others how to become a Dionysus. And it is the Orphic teachings which state categorically and openly the ancient knowledge that God is love, which manifested in the beginning as Eros, the firstborn, love and light of the universe. And because of Orpheus and what he achieved, the Dionysian Mysteries were thereafter sometimes known as the Orphic Mysteries, or the Orphic Dionysian Mysteries. Now, Orpheus himself lived in the northern part of Thracia, the head and crown area of Thracia, a land that is now Bulgaria. And he was a king there. He was the king of the area. And the Rila and Rhodope mountains are associated with him and the whole Orphic Dionysian Mysteries. So I've marked the Rhodope here on the map. Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria, is just on the north side of the Rila mountains. The Rila and the Rhodope mountains go together. And in the Mysteries, if we go into it ever deeper, and if we ever get a chance to go out there together, I'll show you how the whole mountain range itself was considered in terms of landscape, the body of Orpheus himself, and which is Dionysus incarnate, you can see. And then just as Orpheus was a renovator as well as exemplar of the Dionysian Mysteries, so Jesus Christ, who came later, was the renovator and exemplar of the Orphic Dionysian Mysteries. In other words, the Christian mysteries are fundamentally a development of the Dionysian Mysteries. And so it is for good reason that Jesus sent his disciples into Europe to prepare things for the end of time or end of the age, as it's said in the Bible, which time is right now, the end of a great age of 12 ages, a great time cycle of 26,000 years. Well, I'll discuss this further when I deal with the Christian mysteries later on in this series. Now, the initiates and adepts of the European Renaissance developed the story much further, with the Dionysian Christian mysteries being the fundamental mysteries in Europe at that time. As of now, the end of the Great Age and the beginning of the New. Now, I'm going to share with you now some maps showing the great landscape temples of Europe and their chakra systems, denoting in terms of the landscape and nature the great Dionysian myth of Zeus, Persephone, Zagreus and Dionysus. Symbolically, the bull, the cow, the calf and the swan. So this is a series I'll just show you. So here we got Europa sitting on the neck and back, neck and shoulders of the bull, which is Zeus. And in the Dionysian mysteries, Europa is Persephone. Then they're in love with each other, they make love, and they have a love child. And in terms of the landscape, we found that this is this great landscape temple, which is very much associated with the Grail mysteries, all the Grail stories, which I'm going to talk about later on in the series. But this landscape temple is born as a result of the connection between the British Isles, if you like, and mainland Europe. It's a great landscape temple in its own right, and appears to represent the landscape version of Zagreus, when Zagreus is born, in terms of the landscape. Because the landscape, the whole of nature participates in these things. But our mythology just is a way of just describing it. And eventually, Zagreus gets attacked by the Titans, torn to pieces, but the heart is rescued by Pallas Athena with the help of Zeus and raised up to become the swan. And the swan is called Dionysus. Well, Zagreus becomes Dionysus, the bull calf becomes the swan. And he's raised up or ascended to the highest heights, the highest heaven, where he becomes one with his father Zeus. So we've found the landscape temple representing that has a spine coming up from Sardinia, Corsica, through Milan, Constance, the Echensteiner, and on up through Jutland, through the Himmelberg, and into the Jotunheimen Mountains. We found this is representing the spine of the swan, and then the chakra system of the bull becomes the wings of the swan. So in fact, it makes a great cross, if you like, cross in the landscape. And the north-south route was as famous a pilgrimage route as the east-west route. So it was known from very ancient times and pilgrimaged all the way down from Norway, all the way down here. And then, of course, people usually went to Rome and Naples rather than jumping over the sea to Corsica and Sardinia. But that's because they save them having to take boats and so on. But that's how it was set up. The great pilgrimage cross of Europe, which is also the swan, which is in the sky, is known as the Northern Cross. So you see how the two things marry together here. Really rather wonderful. And the swan appears, as it were, in the mainland, which is connected with Zeus, the bull, Zeus, because the swan, Dionysus, becomes one with the father. So I think that must be the reason for that. And then after that, you get the Leda and swan mythology, and who give birth to Gemini, and so the story goes on. But I'm just going to tell you this part of the story so far. So just going to give you a short synopsis of the myth itself, the Dionysian myth. Persephone, loving Zeus and being loved in return, is impregnated by Zeus's love and conceives a child of love. After 8 months' pregnancy, she asks to see the glory of the Father. Zeus at first denies her this, as he knows what the result would be. However, at the third time of asking, Zeus can deny her no longer, as this is the spiritual law. So he appears to Persephone in all his glory, and as a result, she is consumed in fire. Well, Zeus rescues the child and holds the child in his thigh for a further month, after which the child is born. The child, now known as Zagreus, is immediately attacked by the Titans. To escape them, Zagreus changes into various symbolic animal forms, eventually reverting to that of a bull calf. And the Titans catch Zagreus in his bull form and tear him apart, rip him apart, devouring the pieces. But the goddess Pallas Athena, with the help of Zeus, rescues and raises up the heart of Zagreus, building around it a new form, a beautiful form of light, symbolized as a swan. And again, with Athena's help, the swan flies up to the highest heaven, and in this way Zagreus becomes Dionysus, the twice-born son of God, who is one with his father Zeus. His full name and title is Zagreus Dionysus, son of man and son of God, the mortal immortal. Son of man and son of God, the mortal immortal. Exactly the epithet given to Jesus, if you remember. As for the Titans, they are destroyed by Zeus with fiery thunderbolts and turned to ashes. Now, in some versions of the myth, Zeus implanted Zeus's heart into the mortal woman Semele, from whom the child was eventually born as Dionysus. That myth's a little bit more complicated, so I'm not going to tell that one fully. But in other versions of the myth, Demeter, the mother of Persephone, is the one who gathered together all the parts of Zagreus, reassembled them around his heart, and then resurrected Zagreus as Dionysus. Now, this classical Dionysian myth is equivalent to the ancient Egyptian myth of Osiris, Isis, and Horus, wherein Osiris takes on the metaphorical form of a bull, Isis that of a cow, whilst Horus is their bull calf, who becomes the falcon that flies up to the highest heaven. So same wisdom, same symbolism, if you like, but different language that is told in. Now, the whole story involves what are known as the three selves that we each are. Zeus, which translates as Deus in Latin or God in English, is the spirit of divine love and signifies our spirit or divine self, as well as that of the whole universe. Persephone signifies the natural human soul, sometimes called the psyche. Zagreus is the celestial soul, the blend of spirit, Zeus, and psyche, Persephone. Hence he is the immortal mortal, or son of God, son of man, who in his highest ascended form is totally at one with his father Zeus. These describe the three states of being that each of us are, our three selves: the natural soul, our psyche, which is mortal; our celestial soul, which is our mortal immortal; and our divine spirit, which is completely immortal. These are also referred to as the three worlds of existence: natural, celestial, and divine, or simply as body, soul, and spirit. How much of our celestial soul we develop depends on how well we live in each of our incarnations or appearances as natural souls. So each of our incarnation as a natural soul, a person, is vitally important that we do it well. Really important. If we do it really well, we'll create more of our celestial soul and gain more illumination as a result. Now, this whole mythological story describes how true love, when expressed as love in action, can not only transform the form and personality of the natural soul, but also transmute it, or part of it, into a celestial form of light. This is why Persephone, the natural soul, is consumed in the fire of Zeus. This fire is the fire of love in action, which is what gives birth to the golden child, the celestial soul, just as a candle flame gives birth to a sun of radiant light. It is the process of illumination. For instance, the candle, once lit, transforms from wax to liquid to vapor to flame. Then the flame transmutes to light. So first the transformations and then the transmutation. As a wax, whether it's solid, as a candle, whether it's solid wax or liquid or vapor or flame, it's a limited form. But as soon as it becomes light, it's transmuted, it becomes unlimited. Its form has no limitations. It shines throughout the universe. So it's a good symbol to use, the candle. The alchemists use it, and it gives you the idea of earth to water to air to fire, and then ether, which is light. And also we get from all this the expression, set your heart on fire. First of all, you've got to melt your heart, then you set it on fire with love in action. That's what it means, love in action. Set your heart on fire. Put your whole soul, your whole love, your whole heart into it. I mean, we even say that, don't we, as an expression? Put your heart into it. Put your heart into it. Set your heart on fire. So, whilst Persephone, the natural soul, has been consumed in a flame of love, symbolic flame of love, the child of love is said to be held in Zeus's thigh. The thigh is a synonym for the universal light of love and the intensity of that love. And eventually the child, Zagreus, the celestial soul, is born from Zeus's thigh. This is a moment in time that represents the end of that particular act of love performed by Persephone, the natural soul. You could say it was the end of her pregnancy, as it were, in terms of this symbolism. The child Zagreus is a celestial form of light, the embodiment of truth as knowledge of truth, a knowledge that illumines our natural soul. And this illumination is synonymous with joy, which once created is never lost, it's only added to. When child Zagreus is born, then follows the Titanic attack or testing. This describes the ensuing process of initiation in what are called the greater mysteries, in which the natural soul, together with his or her celestial soul, perform further acts of love. By this means, the stature, strength, and beauty of the celestial soul is increased. Its knowledge of truth increases, and its light grows greater and ever more beautiful and magnificent. And this initiatory process is associated with Pallas Athena, the 10th muse, goddess of all the arts and sciences. As such, acts of love by an illumined soul on the initiatory path of service are accomplished by means of increasing inspiration, artistry, and knowledge of truth. Eventually, the celestial soul reaches the highest heaven of consciousness and expression, which is known as Dionysus, son of God, who is totally at one with the Father. Orpheus showed this, and Jesus showed it, even in even better way, perhaps, in front of his disciples, his initiates. Now, I've seen some of these things. I'm a little bit clairvoyant, and so I'm blessed with perception of these things, and I've tried to sketch them for you. I'm going to show you something of it. So first of all, the natural soul. Natural soul in its physical body looks something like this, and then it has a little radiance of a brilliant blue light, like tiny filaments of light coming out at an inch or two from its body, sometimes known as the dense etheric aura. So here's the egg-shaped aura, and I've tried to, the little blue lines represent the dense etheric aura, sometimes called the electromagnetic body, because it's almost physical, really. It's an energy body. And then the chakras I've shown quite bright and so on. So this is somebody who's in a good state of being, basically, I've shown. So this is showing you somebody who does perform acts of service, acts of love. And so all the time he or she will be creating what's called the celestial soul and adding it, increasing it. Celestial soul looks like this. It has an aura like angelic wings. And this is why we have the Easter egg for Easter. It represents the bird, as you like, hatching out of the egg. In terms of the Dionysian myth, this is the swan's egg that the Dionysus, the swan, hatches out of. And it's created because as a result of love in action, you raise the Kundalini all the way up the spine. It lifts the heart wisdom up. The heart is shining, it shines like a little sun, but the more love we give, the bigger it becomes. And it's associated with the archangel Michael, which means the countenance of the Lord. So as it says, it's somewhere in the Bible, we lift up the countenance of the Lord with our acts of service. Kundalini lifts it up until it becomes bigger and bigger, and that light, that sun, Michaelic sun, shines through the face like that and creates this great halo around the head. And the heart flame, the flame of love, the heart set on fire, does have a flame of love that has this sun of light in it. And that heart flame has been raised up until it comes right round the head, and that sun is in the middle of that flame, shining through the face in that way, creating the halo. Well, the Kundalini rises up like a fountain. It's called the fountain of life, and it bursts up through the crown of the head, produces what's called the three plumes of light, or tongues of flame, and arches out on each side like a fountain. So it's called the fountain of life, and blesses the ground all around. So sometimes called the dew of heaven, in Latin, ros. So one of the meanings of Rosicrucian is not just rose, but actually this rose dew, the heavenly dew or manna from heaven, which blesses the ground and everything all around. And anyone with a great aura like this, you don't have to get that close, and you already feel the presence of that person, the good presence, which is healing and helpful. And then beyond this, there is the divine aura. And this is the heart. Divinity really lies in the heart, but you expand it until, like Jesus, you become all heart. But this is like a starting off point. So the heart chakra, in a very large state, can grow as big as that. But in a great soul, like Orpheus or Jesus was, it can become more like that. And I've a few times, not many times, but a few times, been aware of auras like this stretching miles from somebody who's incarnate right now in the world. So there are great masters incarnate in the world with these huge celestial auras that can stretch miles. And one can develop the ability to sense these things and even see them. So anyway, I thought I'd share that with you because it can help make things a bit clearer. So the mysteries themselves for initiation are divided into two parts called the lesser mysteries and the greater mysteries, each with their degrees of initiation. The lesser mysteries concern the initiatory process of the psyche or natural soul, that's Persephone, in order to give birth to the celestial soul, Zagreus. For this, the cycle of nature with its seasonal birth, its germination, for instance, its growth, flowering, fruiting, and harvesting, which is the death of the cycle, was used for its allegorical teaching, especially that concerning cereals such as barley or wheat, typical things that were farmed in those days and still are farmed. But the bull or pig was also used. The new initiate, for instance, was given a calf or pig to look after at the start of his initiations, and then to look after it, nurture it, and raise it to full growth and adulthood, and then to sacrifice it. And in the sense, it meant to represent the initiate himself or herself. So whereas the natural cycle was an annual one, the animal cycle consisted of many annual cycles. And in this way, the initiate was taught about cycles within cycles and could relate one to the other and thus to him or herself. Now, the greater mysteries concern the rebirth and raising of the heart of Zagreus to become Dionysus. That's resurrection and ascension in Christian terms. For this, the cultivation of the vine and making of wine was used as an allegorical teaching. To be able to do this and produce a good wine, and then to enjoy it in the right way by sharing it in a sacred love feast, was considered a great art and science. And the various stories were invented to portray these things. I'm going to show you a chart I've made of some of these stories. And it makes like a ladder. I've shown it like a ladder, 7-rung ladder of initiation. So you go through the elements, as it were, twice over: earth, water, air, fire in the lesser mysteries, and then transmutation into ether or light. And then there's a further 4 degrees of initiation that follow from that, as it were. So start off, one of the stories is Persephone being abducted by Hades. You know, she's down in the world. She's really incarnate in a physical body in nature. And she becomes queen of Hades and married to the god Hades. And there she has to learn to rule wisely. And then she's visited by Hermes or Mercury, which is the celestial soul of either her own self or another great soul who's come to help her. And then she gives birth. She then goes through her death, you know, consumed in fire and flame, and gives birth to Zagreus. And Zagreus attacked and dismembered, but his heart is rescued. And then we start the greater mysteries. And in the greater mysteries, you've got the birth and education of Zagreus, who's also beginning to be called Dionysus. And then he's raised up a bit further in the next degree. He discovers or is taught the secret of wine. So how to grow the grape and so on like that and make wine out of it. And then he travels the world teaching the world winemaking. And then he's raised to the highest heaven to become one with the Father, full illumination. And in the Greek mysteries, the Greek version of these Dionysian mysteries, there are different names given to the people in these initiates in these different degrees. And they were called different things. So I put the names up here. So the catharsis was the beginning. It's equivalent to baptism in the Christian church. Baptism by water, called this purification process. Then mysteria, the participation in the mystery itself, to start learning about it. Of course, you carry on being in the mystery, but this is it's put on in such a way that you really know you're acting out a drama. But then that increases. And then you go into the third degree and you become a master of this, and you become a seer, an epopt. You have the vision of life's secrets. And then you go through your death and resurrection experience, as it were. And then you become the one who is free. You're free, or an aspect of you is free from all carnal attachments. And then you go into the priestly stage, then the royal stage, and then the full illumination, finally at the top. This is one way of showing it for you. Other key symbols in all this is the bread and the wine. These are really important, and it's associated with the mythological stories. So creating bread and creating wine. And they derive from the symbolism used in the lesser and the greater mysteries, the one leading to the other. First, the wheat or barley is grown, ripened, harvested, and threshed. From the threshing is extracted the grain, which is made into bread. The wheat represents Persephone, the bread, Zagreus. The bread is then torn to pieces and eaten, with its heart or essence giving sustenance and strength to the diner. The cultivation of the vine and making of wine, also symbolized by turning water into wine, represents the art of turning innocence into knowledge, which is science, and basic labor into artistry that produces something beautiful and good. And the wine, consumed in the right way, gives happiness and joy to the drinker. Thereby Zagreus, the bull or bread, becomes Dionysus, the swan or wine. And in this way, via the love feast, in Greek called the agape feast, the greatest friendship, love, knowledge, and joy can be expressed and shared. Now, another being key to all this is Pallas Athena. She's known as the goddess of wisdom, but she's wisdom in the sense of wisdom received and known by the intelligence. So really she represents the illumined intelligence, filled with wisdom. She's illumined by the wisdom, and such knowledge is known as illumination. Hence, she is the goddess of poetry and philosophy, and all of the arts and sciences which poetry and philosophy had. And she's known, because of this, she's known as the 10th muse. And as the 10th muse, she inspires her poets, philosophers, artists, and scientists. And she's also known as the spear shaker. Her main symbol she always carries is this spear, which is said to shake, or she shakes the spear. And her actual name, Pallas Athena, in one interpretation of it, means spear shaker, the one who brandishes or shakes the spear. And her spear represents her inspirational light, inspired into hearts, so as to illumine the minds and lead to wise artistic actions, producing good for all. And this illumination that Athena represents is described allegorically and dramatically in the myth describing Athena's birth from the head of Zeus. To start with, in this myth, Athena's mother, Metis, goddess of deep thought and wise counsel, was swallowed by Zeus. After much pondering, this gave Zeus a terrible headache. So Hephaestus was called upon to cleave Zeus's skull with an axe to release the pressure. Athena then leapt out of Zeus's forehead, shaking her spear of light and crying aloud with such a great shout that heaven and earth shuddered before her. So the myth tells us. And when we experience moments of illumination, it is a bit like that. It's like our crown chakra suddenly open, and then we're in that. It's kind of something amazing. You say it's amazing, if you like. And I think one of the shouts that she's supposed to say is Eureka. I found it, I've got it, I know it. Now Athena rescues and raises the heart of Zagreus, turning the bull form into the swan form by means of inspiring and enhancing Zagreus's abilities artistically and scientifically. So Zagreus Dionysus thus becomes an artist in all that he or she does, and a poet-philosopher in all that he or she speaks or writes, and increasingly so. Now, Dionysus, as I've said, means son of Zeus. And that's literally what its name means. So it comes from the ancient Greek, and Dio, Dionysus is Dio or Dio, which means of Zeus, and Neusus, which means son of Zeus, or son of God. And he was also known under other names. So he's known as Iacchos in the Eleusinian Mysteries, which the Romans then turned into Bacchus. So Iacchos became Bacchus. He's also known as Eleutherios, meaning the liberator, an epithet he shared with Eros. And he was known as Lycnites or Lycnites, he of the winnowing fan. That's referring to the grain, that which represents Zagreus, born at the culmination of the lesser mysteries. And the grain is then made into bread. The bread is then torn to pieces. Dionysus was the god of acting, music, and poetry, also of merriment and wine. And he was revered at Delphi, where he presided over the oracle for the 3 winter months, November, December, and January, whilst Apollo was away visiting the Hyperboreans, the people who live in the land of the north. The biennial nocturnal rites of Tristeria were held on Mount Parnassus in winter, which celebrated the emergence of Dionysus from the underworld. So Parnassus and Delphi were important in this story, or made important by the Greeks. And Dionysus was said to be reborn just after the winter solstice. This was later formalized to January the 6th, now called Epiphany, the day on which Dionysus changed water into wine. He had certain key emblems. He had a wreath of ivy, or of laurel or bay, which was worn as a chaplet or crown. And this represented victory over death, which is mortality, and everlasting life, immortality. So that's what his ivy wreath or crown represented. He carried a thyrsos, which was a sacred rod topped with ivy and vine leaves, and sometimes a pine cone, which represented Dionysus himself. And he also is shown holding a cantharos, which is Greek for a drinking vessel or a drinking horn for wine. And he was sometimes shown wearing the pelt of a panther, signifying the conquering or controlling of panther-like tendencies. But instead of actually wearing it, he's sometimes shown riding a leopard or panther, like in this picture I've got here, I'm showing you. It's equivalent to, in the Hindu teachings, of Shiva riding a tiger. So he's either riding a leopard or panther, or he's riding a mule or a donkey. Where have you heard that before? Or reclining on a couch during an agape feast, a love feast. Now, there are various versions of the Dionysian Mysteries that the Greeks performed when the Greeks took over that part of Thracia. Well, they took over quite a lot of Thracia. And the Eleusinian Mysteries were the most famous ones. And these were Dionysian Mysteries that were performed at Eleusis and Athens. So they're the Greek versions of the Dionysian Mysteries. But the Greeks also established these mysteries at Cumae, which is at Naples or near Naples in southern Italy. And this was later taken over by the Romans and became their main mystery center of initiation. And in these versions of the mysteries, the symbolism of the bull was replaced by that of the boar at Eleusis in Athens and elsewhere. The bardic mysteries in Britain also used the boar symbolism. And the original Hebraic and Solomonic mysteries also used the boar symbolism, which is why the boar or pig was taboo. It was sacred. Non-initiated Jews were simply taught that the pig, and thus the meat, pork, derived from the animal, was unclean and therefore not to be eaten. So it protected the pig. The boar or pig wasn't killed in the wrong way. And because it was sacred in the mystery tradition. Now, this symbolism and the knowledge it represented was carried over into the European Renaissance, including the A, the symbol of the A, or double A signatures is sometimes shown. So in this particular emblem, you can see the double A. Here's the pyramid, and here's the boar, and here's the swineherd. Actually, Apollo was known as the swineherd, so it's probably a picture of Apollo with the boar pointing to these two pillars. The actual ruins that you're seeing here is of Solomon's temple, the ruins of Solomon's temple that was rebuilt. And that's the story in Freemasonry, the story of the Royal Arch degree about this happens. And it's also called the instauration of Solomon's temple, the rebuilding of it. And it's very important, the whole Bacon story. Bacon calls his whole work, Francis Bacon calls his whole work the Great Instauration for this reason. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside for you. Now, Dionysus was called Bacchus by the Romans. They also gave him the epithet Liber, which means free, and referred to him as Liber Bacchus, Bacchus the free. That means the one who is liberated and who liberates others. Now, Bacchus in Italian, rather than Roman, Bacchus in Italian is Bacco, spelt B-A-C-O or B-A-C-C-O. And interestingly, German and Italian philosophers, when referring to Francis Bacon, spelt his name Bacon as Bacco, or Bacco, two C's, the Italian name for the god Bacchus. Why did they do this? Add to this that Francis, the word name Francis means free, and we have the rather extraordinary thing that the name Francis Bacon equals Liber Bacchus, i.e. Dionysus. So this takes us deep into the mystery stream, or one of the things that takes us deep into the mystery stream, which flowed strong in the European Renaissance and is still flowing now. We should always remember that. And this wonderful idea of Bacco was also given a name to the sacred herb that was found in North America. It was the people who went over there first found that the indigenous people there were smoking a herb which they consider very sacred, later on called the pipe of peace and so on. And this was brought over to Europe, and it was given the name tobacco, to Bacco, the sacred herb. It became known as a weed, and weed was particularly referred to tobacco in the time of King James I of England. But King James, people loved smoking tobacco, but King James hated it. And so it came to be known through him as the contemptible weed. So the state calendar reports it as the contemptible weed, referring to tobacco. And King James so despised it that he wrote a treatise against the smoking of it. So it was also called the despised weed. And it's also called the noted weed, because in other words, because of James noting it in this way, it was called the noted weed. But it's also noted by others in a different way, noted by the king as contemptible, but many others thought very, very different and used it either just for enjoyment or for sacred mystery purposes, as of course it's meant to be used. Otherwise, don't smoke it. That's the answer, really. The very interesting prayer that Francis Bacon made and got written down and published in 1621, where he uses the word weed referring to tobacco, but also weed was also used by him and Shakespeare and others to mean a disguise, like a mask. So he, in his prayer, I'll quote it for you. "The state and bread of the poor and oppressed have been precious in my eyes. I have hated all cruelty and hardness of heart. I have, though in a despised weed, procured the good of all men." And then Shakespeare writes about it in his sonnet 76. "Why write I still all one, ever the same, and keep invention in a noted weed, that every word doth almost tell my name, showing their birth and where they did proceed." Well, the noted weed is tobacco. Tobacco. Well, you proceed to somewhere. That's what proceed means, to go to somewhere. But he says it shows the name shows where you proceed to, but also shows the birth. Well, you proceed to tobacco. Proceed to tobacco. And Baccho is Bacchus, Dionysus, but Baccho is also Bacon. And Bacon was born. When he was born, he was given that name, Bacon, Francis Bacon. So there are two things here. And in fact, there was a group, maybe more than one group, but who used to meet together to practice the mysteries in one way or another, usually in the form of Freemasonry. And they used to smoke tobacco in a sacred way, but they used to do it as a salute to Bacchus, the god Bacchus, but also to their Grand Master, who was Francis Bacon. And they would just say to Baccho for this. Now, the interesting thing in terms of cipher, if you're interested in cipher, but it can reveal many things too. The word "to" in simple cipher adds up to 33, and Bacon also in simple cipher adds to 33. So 2 equals Bacon equals number 33. Baccho adds up to 23, which is the letters FR in simple cipher, meaning standing for Francis. And Bacon at that time used to sign his name FR Bacon. That was his the signature he used the most. So to Baccho actually can mean FR Bacon, summing of course to 56. And then in what's called reverse cipher, which Bacon and his group used, so it's the alphabet backwards, Elizabethan alphabet backwards, to Baccho comes to 119, and so also does FR Bacon in reverse cipher. So it's like a double check. And then there's a third check, because Bacon and his Rosicrucians also use what's called the K or key cipher. Starts with the letter K, but K was pronounced as key, so it's also a key. See what I mean? And in this cipher, to Baccho sums to 160, and so also does FR Bacon. So there are, it's a triple check of this whole thing. Like they're saying, don't miss this, don't miss this. This is telling you a huge truth, a huge discovery, even if you don't believe it at first. Now, Dionysus was also known as the lame or limping god. And Nonnus of Panopolis, in his Dionysiaca, writes that the name Dionysus means Zeus limp, and that Hermes named the newborn Dionysus this name because Zeus, whilst he carried his burden, lifted one foot with a limp from the weight of his thigh. The burden, of course, is the child that Zeus was holding in his thigh, so it made Zeus limp. So another way of reading Dionysus is Zeus limp. And in fact, in Syracusan language, Nisus doesn't mean son, it actually means limping. Now, William Camden, in 1615 in his Annals, he translates Baccho as the lame. Just to quote Shan O'Neill, by name Baccho, that is the lame. So it was well understood then. And then Shakespeare also says the same in his sonnets, Sonnet 37, so I made lame by fortune's dearest spite, and Sonnet 89, speak of my lameness, and I straight will halt. So if you really know these mysteries and part of these mysteries, you'll know what this refers to. It refers to Dionysus or Bacchus and so on, and it takes you into this great mystery and how it's being performed at that time and can carry on being performed. Now, Dionysus is both male and female. So although usually depicted as a male, he is understood to be both male and female. The natural soul, the psyche or person, becomes, via transmutation of him or herself, a celestial soul, which is then added to the sum total of celestial souls created in previous lives. And some people refer to the celestial soul as the oversoul, or spiritual soul, or higher self, and to the natural soul as the lower self or personality. So there are different names given to these things. Can become a bit confusing, I know. Now I want to show you these Dionysus headpieces, one in the Shakespeare folio and the other in Francis Bacon's Advancement of Learning. And in the Shakespeare folio, which is the top headpiece here, the Dionysian headpiece here, it shows Dionysus as a male figure, born out of this cornucopia of nature, representing the harvesting and sacrifice of nature in order to produce the bread and all the wine, whichever. And that produces Dionysus. And he holds on to peacocks representing his beautiful thoughts. And there he's got these plumes of illumination on his head. And then the archers each side represent the Gemini, the Gemini are also known as swans. And so that's another mystery I'll talk about another time. And then you've got the little giveaway here. You've got two hares shown unusually back to back to each other. And hares in those days, like rabbits, were called conies. So they're back, it's a rebus, meaning back coney. Two conies back to back, a back coney, rebus. So it's a little secret signature hidden away there. But anyway, the main thing is to see that Dionysus here is shown as male. But when you go to Bacon's Advancement of Learning, published in 1640, Dionysus is shown as feminine, female here, and holding two cornucopia. And the Gemini, each side, are shown as women, female. The Gemini actually had twin sisters. So if you like, those are the twin sisters. So male and female. So I just wanted to point this out because it was very well known to the initiates of that time, and we should get to know these things now because there's such a furor about all this that it's, with all the woke language and so on coming up, but things get a bit tricky. Language is not perfect, which is why symbolism is used. Now all this all of this is achieved really by means of and with the help of Pallas Athena. She's known as the spear shaker, her spear symbolizing the light which inspires and lifts up the hearts of all her heroes until they become fully illumined. By inspiring Zagreus the initiate with poetic, philosophical, and artistic talents, Pallas Athena rescued his heart and raised him, as Dionysus, to the heights of human endeavor. She does this also with others, men and women, till we can all become Dionysus. And Dionysus, or Bacchus, is the patron god of theatre. Pallas Athena with the 10th muse was William Shakespeare's muse, and Pallas Athena was also Francis Bacon's muse. The goddess is key to everything. Thank you, Athena, and thank you all for listening to me for all this time.